My name is Lexi and I use pronouns she, her, and hers. When I first felt I was gender nonconforming, I was probably as young as 4. There were a lot of times growing up where, as kids, I was playing with like other neighborhood kids, and I would always take on a female role. And those were some of the happiest times of my life, actually. It was really through the power of drag that I got to play with my gender and finally kind of realize that I never wanted to take the drag off. That there were things like skirts, dresses, heels that I wanted to be a part of my everyday life. From 4 to 18, I didn't really share it with anybody because there were, I think, a number of instances growing up where, you dress up as like your mom or your grandma and you play in mom's closet. And times like that, I got policed around my gender. There were a lot of times in my life that I was pushed into these gender roles. I loved my childhood. I wouldn't go back and really change much about it outside of, I think, knowing that I was trans and being able to state that earlier. I was a part of a youth organization in Northern California called GSA Network, which stood for the Gay Straight Alliance Network. And so I had a lot of peers around the same age. We were all figuring out our identities while also doing a lot of grassroots organizing with other LGBTQ youth in high schools. I remember doing an internship with the ACLU of Northern California, and they took me to a conference where Miss Major was speaking. And Miss Major, if you don't know her, is a veteran of Stonewall. She's an abolitionist. She's a former executive director of the Transgender Variant and Intersex Justice Project in San Francisco. She's a Black trans woman who is just an elder and a leader in the trans community. And she lives completely unapologetically. And so when I first met her, it was like meeting Oprah. She's like a larger than life figure, and she exudes just love and acceptance. And after meeting her in person, and I think understanding more about her life and her values and just who she was, something clicked for me. It was being able to see that practice of what it was like to be trans and how you live as a trans woman, how you live as a community leader, how you live just as somebody who wants to change the world. I guess I first shared being trans when I was around 18 or 19. The reaction was love. It was just complete, utter, unconditional love and acceptance. I think that's why us as trans people, us as queer people, get so drawn to community, because it's so validating and it's so, there's no judgment, there's no expectation about who you are, and you can just show up as you are. Miss Major was one of 3 trans women of color who I guess I look up to and kind of idolize personally. So there's also Sylvia Rivera and Marsha P. Johnson. All 3 of them were at Stonewall, which was not the first, but definitely the biggest and most well-known case of queer and trans people standing up to the police. And in the 60s, it was a very different time. So trans people were being arrested just for dressing however they wanted. And so a large part of the way that they showed up for community was just accepting people for who they are. And I think especially in the US, we have such a refined image of beauty, of fashion, of culture. And for so long, there's been this beautiful community of especially Black and brown, queer and trans people of color across the US who have turned fashion, turned art, turned culture on its head. And there's just such a unconditional love and acceptance that Miss Major and Sylvia Rivera and Marsha P. Johnson had for our community and had for each other, that learning that proved to be, I think, the most important lesson for me in terms of we're all a part of something bigger, and that we're fighting for our lives in a lot of cases. And statistics on trans people are horrifying. And so if I can give somebody the love that was gifted to me, sometimes that makes all the difference in whether they choose to continue to pursue happiness or not. Yeah, I think that's been the biggest inspiration of all for how to live my life. Just to be unapologetic and when possible, and really always to be giving back to those in need. As the executive director of Trans Can Work, I can say that hiring trans people is one of the most effective ways of diversifying not just your staff, but also diversifying your product and output. Trans people are incredibly creative and often are have really strong resumes. As a part of my job, I work to get gainful employment for trans, gender variant, and intersex people. And we have clients whose resumes would blow you out of the water if you didn't know that they were trans. And the World Economic Forum said, as a society, the more acceptance you have of LGBTQ plus people equals a stronger correlation of a resilient economy. So when something like the pandemic happens, or the 2008 housing crisis, that your economy is quicker to bounce back if you're more accepting of LGBTQ people. And I think that goes to specific companies as well. And as honky as it seems, the American dream is supposed to allow for everybody to chase their dreams. And I think if we were all privileged and able to do that, that we might be living in a very different America, and one that I hope would be just better in a lot of ways.